You're listening to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, please join us on Patreon.
You are listening to Paris Underground Radio. My name is Annette Deleu, and I am the host of The Heart of You. Welcome back. This is episode 43. Today, we have Eileen Head, who is a transformational coach, and she helps couples and singles reconnect to deeply intimate, meaningful relationships. Because I'm sure at times, most of you have felt stuck or trapped or powerless to change the situation that you're in. And Eileen is the person to help you out with that. Eileen is going to speak to us today about Enneagrams. Eileen, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Wonderful. So let's get started. Tell us your spiritual awakening story.
Oh, wow. I met my husband at 16 and married at 18 in a very traditional relationship, not knowing much about ourselves and me in particular. And my husband, I called him my silent partner because he never talked much. He didn't relate much. We didn't even have a daily conversation of how's your day going. It was like we were business partners. We both selected things in the marriage that we were good at, and we did those, and we had the same values and morals and goals and all of those things working, except the part for me, which was the emotional connection. And so as the years went on, I became very stressed. I became very, it started to take my life force energy. If you know what that is, people, your energy sort of starts to get taken up with stress and worry and anxiety. And so I came to a point in my life where I was crying all the time. I was crying in the grocery store, big tears, crying going home. I'd go to walk into the house and it was like there was a boulder on my shoulder. And this one day I'm standing in the middle of the bedroom in sort of a corner. And this is going to get graphic. I'll warn you. I'll try to make it. I'm standing there, and it's like the top of my head blew off, and stuff hit the roof, and it's coming down the walls, and it's pussy, and it's yellowy, and it's like, I looked at that, and I thought, girl, you are in very big trouble here.
Wow.
And I felt something or someone reach out and take my shoulders, and they rocked me, and they said, in this cadence, they said, you better start looking after yourself because nobody else will. And then after that, I had a number of other experiences of sleeping out on the deck in the summertime and being dead awake. And it was like someone tiptoed up and yelled in my ear, Eileen. And I'd jump awake and I'd look around and there was no one around, no stairs to get there. My husband was sleeping in the house. That happened twice. So those were signs. Wake up, wake up. And there's been many others as well. So let me talk about the Enneagram because we're talking about that. I was in a meditation and I saw myself in this room that had no walls or ceiling. And I saw these beings sitting off to the side and they were mumbling to themselves. And then one came over to me and said, you will bring healing through the Enneagram. And that's why I've been so passionate about it.
Wow. So now, did you know when you had that first experience, when you felt sort of your head getting blown off energetically, like, do you know who that was holding you? Did you really connect with, was it one of your guardian angels? Like, who was it?
Probably one of my guides.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would think, or one of the angels. I mean, I believe they're sort of one and the same. And, it was a real aha. And then my son at 14 brought home his future wife who knew things about the spiritual realm that my traditional upbringing had no concept whatsoever. And that started putting me in the energy of the spiritual realm. And then I just became fascinated with it.
Right. Now, were you scared when you had those particular things happen where you were having those experiences?
No, because I was already then starting to delve into Reiki, and I was just open to spiritual experiences. And of course, when you open yourself to that sort of energy, people show up, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of people show up that are also connected to that energy. And I started learning from them. And that's how the story's unfolding and continues to.
Beautiful. That's a pretty incredible story. And just hearing everything that you went through, it sounds like your clairaudience was wide open if you were hearing those voices say to you, Eileen, wake up, It's incredible to hear when people have their spiritual awakening, how it shows up, whether it shows up, like you said, in a voice that comes to you, or if it's a vision of some sort, or, if it's something that you just feel. It sounds like that was the dominant, but then you felt everything, right? Like
Yes.
it's incredible.
And I started getting some callbacks on mammograms and different things. And it was like, this is your wake up call. Make a decision here. Either be happy where you are or choose to make a decision. And my decision was to leave a 35-year marriage, which caused a big hoo-ha, let me tell you.
Sure. That puts you on the path of Enneagrams.
Yes.
Can you tell our audience what an Enneagram is?
So most of the time they'll either go, oh, the Enneagram, I love it, or they go, the Ennea what? And so the Enneagram has been around since the 1700s. It's a very well respected, much more advanced model than the other personality models that are out there, like Colors or Myers-Briggs, which is a total different way of looking at personality. That one is about how your mind thinks to solve problems. The Enneagram helps you to understand how your personality was formed by about the age of 7 in your family of origin. And it's formed by you looking out there and forming a belief that I need to be a certain way and I need to do things in a certain way in order to get the most love and attention. So then you develop these patterns, which then become roles, which then becomes an identity. And that's who you think you are, is this personality. And so the Enneagram really is an ancient body of wisdom that holds the key to unlocking the true depth of our being in ourselves and recognizing it in other people in a kind and compassionate way. And it shows us that there are 9 home personality types, each with our own way of thinking, feeling, acting, and reacting. And so most of us are on a journey to discover, who am I? We can spend a lifetime of who am I? And this makes sense. And I'm reacting this way. And then all of a sudden I'm acting this way. And why is that? And so the Enneagram very, very accurately, when you do find your home type, can help you to understand yourself, your gifts, which a lot of people are totally unaware of, their worth, their value in the world, because that's what we're looking for in our relationships is, do you value me? Do you value me? And when you find that for yourself, you have a strong foundation. And then when you take your challenges, because when you read your Enneagram profile, there's going to be things in there that are going to sting. Like I read my biography, oh, that's so me. And oh my gosh, I didn't know that about me. And oh, that's great. And oh, wow. And then it was like, ooh, I don't like those as well. Those sting a bit.
Yeah. It's always hard to see the shadow side. Yeah.
Right. So when you take those challenges and build them into strengths, that's when you create this strong foundation. And from there, your world absolutely transforms.
So would you mind sort of going over the 9 different personalities, if you will?
Sure, I can do that. So the Enneagram, I didn't give you the background. It's been around since the 1700s. It was brought by the Sufis to the Jesuits, who taught it to the seminarians, and then it started being taken out into North America. And it's used by all different groups of people. Religious people put the sins on them. The corporate uses it as a very sophisticated model for leadership and to bring out the best in their employees. Therapists use it. Counselors use it. It's the fastest way to help people understand each other at a deeper level and connect. And so the 9 different personality types are the perfectors, who as a child came to believe that in order to be loved, they must be perfect. So everything is their perspective is right or wrong, doing everything the right way, or there's a wrong way. And they're very hard on themselves. And they have this inner critic 24/7 that things are never good enough. They're never right. And consequently, that energy comes out in judgments with other people. Like, I'm trying really hard to be perfect here, and you're over here having fun. How can that be? And so it's to help us understand and have compassion for them as they're on their journey before their awakening. And then there's the two supporter, also called as a helper giver. And they feel their worth is in helping in the world, being of service. So they're the ones who, you go to a party and, the host said, let's leave the dishes till tomorrow. Oh, no, we can't do that. They're in the dishpan. They're cleaning up. Where do you need me to help? They feel their worth is in the helping and do not realize that at the same time, their helping can be intrusive to other people. They don't understand that their worth is wound up in their giving and find it difficult to receive. The achiever, the three achiever, are those that, work is their oxygen. They love, love, love to succeed. They work. Work is the first priority. They can be on vacation. They're still always working. They got deals going. They got stuff happening. And unfortunately, a lot of time that pushes out the room for the relationship too, until before awakening. The expressor are our dramatic and our emotional people who experience life at a high level of sensitivity to beauty, to sound, to all things beautiful. And they teach us the beauty of the world. But they also can have highs and lows and dramas because they're highly emotional before they learn how to manage those emotions and the impact those emotions may have on other people who maybe don't know how to respond. The contemplators are our thinkers. They are our intellectuals. They are our teachers and the people who develop IT and work in the IT industry. They can figure out things. They are the thinkers and as I said, the intellectuals and the introverts. The sixth questioner is the most nervous and they're looking out into the world to see what can happen. And they always want to be prepared because they need this security and they're looking for trust in the world. And they also have the funniest wit ever and are the most loyal of people. Then there's the seven optimisters, which all of us want parts of ourselves of this, who are always having fun. Work needs to be fun. They're lighthearted. They gather people around them. People are attracted to them. They're very fun. And when they're undeveloped, they may not show up when they agree to something. They're out having fun or they get sidetracked with something else. Even work needs to be fun. And then there's the asserters. These are the strong people who are usually the owners and business people and the managers who like a sense of control over life. And, they like to run things. And they also, most of the time, people see them as very unemotional. They don't like to be vulnerable. They see that as weak. And what we don't know about them is they have a very soft heart underneath that, all that overprotection. And then we have the peace seekers or the peacemakers who just want everything peaceful. Let's just all get along. Let's all, just be kind to each other and have difficulty in communicating and use passive aggressive behavior as a way of keeping themselves safe. So, there's so much more to this, and we have all of these parts in us. It is a matter of identifying when we use them, why we use them, and how to bring out the best in ourselves and relating to other people.
I love Paris for all of its myriad of options of things to do throughout each and every day. However, it can get a little overwhelming sometimes to figure out what you want to do because there's so much to do. If you're in this position, I highly recommend you listen to Don't Miss This with Jennifer Garrity. She gives you the best of what is going on in Paris for each particular week. It is definitely something I listen to every Sunday, so go and check it out at parisundergroundradio.com. We will be right back with The Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. As you were going through each one of the 9 personalities, of course, in my head, I'm sitting here thinking, oh yeah, that's totally my mom, or that's totally my friend, or, that kind of thing. You can kind of, go to that place of almost identifying somebody with a particular personality when it's your experience that you've had with them. But I mean, how often is it correct that, let's say if I, have a relationship with somebody and I'm like, yeah, they're definitely that particular personality. How often is that correct if you sort of place that on somebody else?
Not always. I've been doing this a lot of time. And my own sister-in-law, I thought she was a supporter. And then all of a sudden one day I went, oh, no, she's a peace seeker. And you
Yeah.
don't want to put that on other people. What this is meant to do is to open your perspective of, oh, they might be reacting because their worth is this way, or they feel that their value is this way, or they're comfortable in these patterns, even if these patterns don't work for them, these behaviors. It can help you be more compassionate of, okay, so now I can relate to this person because they're passive aggressive, or they're need to be a perfectionist, and everything needs to be right or wrong with them. And so you can take those instances with more compassion. And if you can put yourself out of the way and not personalize their reactions, you can relate to people at a deeper level and with a sense of, you access your heart more, your compassion more of understanding people, and you get rid of the judgment and the box thinking of things. The world has to be as you see it, your perspective only.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why I kind of brought that up, because it is sort of almost a natural thing for us to do when you are looking at these different personality types, is to say, oh yeah, that's totally me, or that's totally somebody else I know. And to sort of withdraw that, almost pushing that particular personality type onto somebody else without actually them being involved in taking the test or whatever it happens to be. To do that is actually doing a disservice, I think, because you wouldn't want to place that on somebody else, and you wouldn't want somebody placing that on you.
Exactly. Yes. Because I've been doing this a long time, I recognize patterns, right?
Yeah.
And so when I meet people, I don't necessarily categorize them. I just watch the patterns and I go, oh, okay, yeah, I can relate to you this way. Or, it's broke up into 3 different segments. There are the emotional types, which are the supporters, achievers, and expressors. There's the thinker types, which are the contemplators, the questioners, and the optimisters. And then there's the gut or body types, which are the asserter, peace seeker, and perfecter. So even if you identify 3 segments, that helps you as well. Oh, that person's an emotional base. Sounds like they're an emotional based person. Okay, I can relate to them that way. Or they're in their head more, which for me, being an emotional person, that was a real growth thing, was to get out of my emotional side and relate to people intellectually.
Right.
So it really helps you stretch and grow. I'll tell you, it makes the world so much more richer.
I can imagine. You had me take the test actually before we decided to record this episode, and you asked me to choose one that would be sort of my main personality. And then you asked me to choose 2 that would be what you said it was considered the wing.
Right.
So when I was taking the test, I read through each one of the personalities, and I found it difficult to choose simply because there were certain personalities that I could look at and I could say, oh yeah, that was totally me maybe 10 years ago, but maybe not so much now because, I've done this kind of shadow work, or I've done this work on myself in the Akashic records, or whatever it happens to be. So, I finally did land on a particular personality type, and a lot of that was actually due to the images. So you also, not only do you have descriptions, but then you have images that people can look at and sort of identify with. And it's no surprise, because I'm definitely more of a visual person anyway, that when I looked at the images, that's what sort of solidified that particular personality type for me. The ones that I chose, so I said that I was an expressor. So that was the first one. And the second one I chose was the peace seeker. And then the third was the contemplator.
Yes. And I can tell you why some of those are relevant and some are not. And I want to again stipulate we have all 9 types in us. At any given time, we can access little pieces here and there. And that's why I tell people when they take the test, the paragraph overall, not individual pieces in the paragraph.
Right.
And so as a 4 expressor, let me just look at this. So when you look at the Enneagram symbol, it's very confusing because there's arrows going everywhere. But it doesn't take long for people, and it probably only takes one session for me to explain their Enneagram and which arrows and which personality types they're connected to and why that is. And so for you, I think you also said the supporter. And the supporter is when you are in a stress pattern. These are the patterns that, or the traits or the behaviors that you tend to go to. And when you're in a stress pattern, it's like you become someone different for a short period of time. And you often say, well, that's not like I usually am. And so these are places where you go and then you come back to your home type. Your 5 contemplator is a wing. It's a personality on beside you that flavors your personality, gives you a bit more depth to your personality. You also chose a 9 personality. 2s and 9s are lookalikes. So I would say not so much the peacemaker, because supporters they're all about relationships. So that's how you would relate to that. Your path of development is actually a perfecter. And you might relate to this in your growth in when you become emotional, when those emotions are really strong, you may have had the growth to ground yourself more, to maybe you start making lists, maybe you start looking at more structure, which is, in the beginning of your personality, 4s don't like structures.
Right.
Do you relate to that?
So I'm curious because the ones that I chose were not necessarily the ones that you were giving me. So how do you come to that sort of conclusion? Because that is, I would say that is accurate from the standpoint of, when I am under stress, I can have a tendency to react differently than I normally would. I would say that is definitely true. And also in terms of when I get overwhelmed, if there's too much for me to do, then I do have to go into structure because otherwise it'll just start, stressing me out completely.
And spiraling, right?
Yeah. So I would say that is accurate. But I am curious as to how you came to that, given the fact that I didn't even really choose either one of those 2.
Well, that is the Enneagram basis. Once you choose your home type, then these are the things that come into play. Now, the Enneagram teaches, it can be a lifetime study of finding which home type you are. And, some people take that journey and they bump around. Some people read it and go, yep, that's me. I got that. And others, well, I'm a little of this. Well, I'm a little of that, especially the peace seekers, because they identify with all 9 types. But that's why I feel, for me, I like to help people find it faster and then give them the relevant information afterwards. And that's why I recommend hopping on a call after you've taken the test and let's figure this out. And then I have profiles that I can give you, which are way more information than you may ever want. But it really gives you, the Enneagram is about growth. It is about spiritual growth. It is about wanting to become the best person you can be, and that self-empowerment, that self-love, that self-acceptance of all the parts of yourself, bringing them together. So even now I can be triggered in some things. The theme in my personality is rejection. You may relate to that in our Akashic Records session. And so I find it interesting when I'm doing personalities that those things in past lives often line up. And so I can be triggered, but now I can see it and I can go, there you are again. And now I'm going to accept it, work through it, look at it, and grow from it instead of being wounded by it when I'm rejected or people put me off, and understand why they may be doing that and have no idea. It's my reaction to it. That's the wounds, and that's the healing from the childhood that needs to come about.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful journey to take when you are working through any of those shadow sides. And, we've talked about shadow work on this podcast, and however you do shadow work is entirely up to you. And there are so many different modalities. And it sounds like this is a really great modality to use to dive into your shadow too, because if you have parts of you that you're sort of ignoring, which, it's a constant process of exploration. Like, there are things that I didn't realize were still in my shadow, and all of a sudden they pop up and I was like, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that was still there. And the difference is being able to now have the tools to actually stop and not, as you said, operate from your wounding, and actually not react and say, okay, so where is this coming from and what is this all about? Right.
Or feeling those emotions, right?
Yeah.
As they come up, that's how you heal them, right?
Yeah.
It's in that. And, for me, it gave me compassion. I did my own inner child work and taking myself back at around that age of 7 and looking at my life and really coming to understand how I came about to be this way in the world, and with compassion and understanding, and seeing myself as that little girl who was, in this family, and we all had our own dynamics. I often refer to it as like planets, and we're all, around each other and connected, but we may not be that connected, and all of those things, and to feel the emotions deeply of the not being as connected as I wanted them to be. That's a theme in my life. So am I trying to overconnect to people? How do I manage that? Right? You can only have one ego. And so you are always that home type, but there are 9 levels of development. So there's from the very lower undeveloped to the higher realms of the patterns that are within your home personality. So as my 2 supporter, I now, instead of, you need to do this. Here's my advice. I know all this. I can help you. I can say to people, I have some insights. Are you open to hearing them, or would you rather not? And then letting go of the outcome when they say maybe, no, not so much. I don't need it. Okay. That's all I need to do, right? Instead of feeling that as rejection, I now see that as growth and empowerment, that I can let that go now. Okay. They're not ready, whatever. And I can move past and work through every layer of that comes up that, here you are again, you little devil. And I can make a game of it, like, okay, what do you want this time? All right, what do you want me to do? All right, okay. It's, we know in the spiritual realm that life lessons come up, and they come up a little bit, and then they come up a little bit stronger, and then a little stronger until they're flashing lights. And, life crises happen when we don't pay attention.
Yeah, absolutely. That is so true. And that's when relationships fall apart. That's when you lose jobs. That's when, all of those things start happening, is basically the universe's way of saying, hey, you need to look at this.
Are you trying to manifest your dream of moving to Paris? If you are, I would highly recommend listening to the Paris Estate of Mind podcast. It is right here on Paris Underground Radio, and it will give you everything that you need to know about renting apartments in the City of Light.
We will be right back with The Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. In order for somebody to, let's say, not have relationships fall apart, what are some of the ways in which Enneagrams can help somebody with an interpersonal relationship?
Yeah, so this is a personal journey as well as it's a relationship journey. And so what I do, I had a couple come to me, and they both said, we've tried everything. We've been to therapy. If this doesn't work, we're done. We're tired of struggling. We're done. And so what I do is I interpret their personalities together. I help them to understand, why is your partner getting twisted out of shape about you leaving the cupboard doors open? Like the cupboard, what's the big deal? But to them, it's a crisis, right? How they talk to each other, what's important, why it's important. And the main thing that the Enneagram does is it helps you to understand emotionally how you feel loved and how they feel loved, which is most often different. And so they came to me and I worked with first one and then the other, and then I bring them together and we work out situations, and they came a couple of times. And the last time they came together, I have them sit opposite each other and look in each other's eyes and talk to each other. And, I listen to the wording they're using, and I ask them to reframe the way they're talking and different things they're doing. And by the time they left, they were holding hands and there was a sparkle in their eye again. And that just warms my heart.
Oh, beautiful. Wow.
That's what makes it worthwhile for me. I want to help people. Here's the helper, right? So
right.
So they don't struggle. I struggled for 35 years with a good man.
Yeah. And it makes you wonder sometimes if that experience that you had as a young adult and being married for 35 years, having that experience was sort of meant to happen in order for you to get to where you are now, in order to be able to help people, right?
Unquestionably.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, while you're going through the challenges, you're like, why? And then, the universe is like, oh, yeah, this is why. And you're like,
well,
oh.
Here's the cool thing. As I said, okay, I'm leaving. I mean, we'd said that many, many times, but okay, now I definitely am leaving. And he knew I was serious. Now, all of a sudden, which sometimes happens, okay, let's do something. Let's find a relationship course. And I want to bang my head against the wall, like 35 years of trying to get this man to do this. And all I could find was an Enneagram course. And we started taking that. And my world, like the angels sang, oh my God. When I looked at the two of our personalities together, I could see how we weren't relating, how we could have related, understood each other, my part, his role, instead of blaming him. But I was already too far gone. This can be the love of your life, but love dies. And it was too late. But that brought me to the Enneagram, to your point. That brought me to my life work.
That brings me to a question in regards to working with another person on the challenges that you have. So what do you recommend to somebody if, let's say, their partner is not in that space and doesn't necessarily want to take an Enneagram test or doesn't want to do any of this work? What would you recommend?
In my Stay or Go coaching, I often have mostly women, of course, in their mid-50s. I find women get to a point where, is this all there is? And they have this low-grade dissatisfaction, resentment, and they come to me and they say, okay, I'm ready to go. Help me move through this. And so my first three things, we're going to re-energize, reconnect. We're going to look at everything, but this is going to be about you. And we're going to work on you. And as you shift, everything around you can shift. And their partner has not been involved in the beginning until I teach them how to talk to their partner. And they can say to them, I'm working on me and this is what I've come to discover about me. And I had no idea that might affect you. Have you noticed that? And they go, what's this? I've been blamed my whole life for the one who's screwing up. And now, wow, this is a different dynamic. And they'll say, I'm learning about my personality and these traits, and I wanted to know about yours. And so we start to figure out which personality types they might be from the patterns. And then they can go and say, tell me if this is true for you, because I want to understand you better too. And then all of a sudden I get phone calls. Well, I want in on this. I want my own session. And
That's incredible.
I've seen relationships come back together, like and not everyone, of course, but this is a personal journey.
Yeah. And it's something that I have had experience with in another way. I've spoken about this in another episode in regards to my relationship with my father. And while I was doing all this energetic work, just the way that I was showing up in our relationship changed and shifted the way things were between us. So what you're describing is very much exactly that. It just changes and shifts. And so then, if that person is now more engaged and now is more interested in all of these changes that you're making, then that in turn sort of, intrigues them into wanting to do the work as well. Is that basically what you're saying?
Yeah, you're taking responsibility for yourself, because we know we have our own stories. We create these stories and we make them up, and judgments on the other people. But in the spiritual work that you and I do, it is about taking responsibility, the ability to change your response. And when you start working on you and taking accountability, and one of the deadly sins in relationships is justifying your behavior when it's bad behavior. So I work with people, and I even work with career people, problems at work and siblings and all sorts of different instances. But when you start working on you and take responsibility alone for how you're responding, that shifts everything.
When you're working on you, obviously that is something that makes profound shifts and changes. When you are working on you for you, that happens. If you are working on you to get a result out of somebody else, personally, I have found that is not as effective, because your sort of energy is focused on the wrong thing. You're focusing on somebody else versus on yourself. Would that be the same case here as well?
Yeah, because you're looking to fix the other person.
Yeah, exactly.
You're still looking, your perspective is, I'm looking to find out what's wrong with you, instead of looking to find out that was the biggest healing for me, was that what was my part in that? How was I affecting him? And when I began to see that, and that sort of healed things for me, and I had more compassion with him, and I was able to bring about that divorce very peacefully for my children. We continued to have suppers together monthly at least. There was no dramas with my kids, or after the first maybe month or so that things level, but I could lead everyone else through it because I didn't have my own drama. I was just, I knew their personality types. I knew how to manage myself, basically.
Now, have you come across any personality types where it's just incredibly difficult for somebody with, let's say, this particular personality type to get along with another personality type? Have you ever found that almost friction between two main personality types?
Absolutely. That's what causes the friction in people. It's the perspective. I mentioned the perfecter who, they're at work putting in long hours. They're getting it right. I'm not going to give that until every I is crossed and T, and I'm going to go over it and over it. And over here, the optimist at 4:00 is having chair races up and down the aisle. Like, it's time to go. Let's go have fun. Like, man, that's not right. And why can they do that? And of course, the supporter that I am, that wants to connect with people deeply, finds it difficult with some contemplators because they're such head types and they're so logic. They don't want to go in the emotional realm. So yeah, but that's what makes it interesting too.
So then after somebody has a session with you or several sessions with you, and they have a deeper understanding of their personality type and the relationships that they have as well, then does that friction start to subside, and then it becomes easier to manage and sort of navigate through all of the personality types?
A lot of the time, but there's things like siblings and childhood issues, and a lot of people cannot negotiate those by themselves or on their own. And sometimes those, as well as I do, that in this lifetime, those may not be resolved. No matter how much growth you personally have, if the other person isn't willing or there, it may not get resolved. And that's part of understanding yourself, knowing you did the best and letting go of outcome, which is one of the biggest things that I teach, besides law of attraction and manifesting and all that, is letting go of outcome. That frees you from so much.
And that's the hardest thing, right? I mean, letting go of outcome is probably one of the hardest things. That, and I would say living in uncertainty, which is, I think those are two of the hardest things that we as humans deal with on an emotional level.
Yeah, and there's a whole personality type that lives in that realm. The questioner is fear, worry, and anxiety is the basis of their personality. Yeah. And for them, they feel they're deficient. There's something wrong with them. And yet there's millions of people who think, act, and react the way they do. And their gift is making our world safer because they're always looking out there to make systems and whatnot safer. And they have a plan A, a plan B, a plan C, where the rest of us are just kind of winging it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. You were talking about siblings or let's say family members and, potentially having things not be resolved in this lifetime. The other thing I wanted to mention too was that, sometimes it's not in our soul contract to resolve it. So maybe we actually came to this incarnation with a particular goal, and it's possible the other person didn't fulfill their end of the bargain, or it's possible that you already fulfilled it, but it's not your job to wake them up, or it's not your job to make them better in any way. Maybe you had a different potential mission for this particular lifetime. So, I think people sometimes want to fix everything before there is an end of the journey, before people cross over. And I certainly had that with my father, where I was like, well, asking my guides, like, oh, well, do I need to get him to do an Akashic record session so he can clear some stuff before he crosses over? And they're like, nope, he's good. He needs to do all of what he needs to do, and you don't need to interfere with that. And I'm like, okay, cool. Right. So, I mean, there are certain things that, they don't necessarily need to be resolved.
Absolutely. I 100% agree in that. Like, my personality before this was a super pleaser. I felt like I was clothes on a clothesline. My hands were attached, but my feet were flapping in the wind, and I was somebody for everybody. Now, when I need to stand up and maybe give people the hard facts, like I do in coaching sometimes, bring people to awareness or whatever, before I would have cringed from that. And now, like you say, I believe it's in my soul contract to bring them to awareness, maybe plant seeds, maybe they're not ready for it and they go away upset. However, I feel I've fulfilled my role.
Well, and actually, even if somebody goes away upset, that is almost an indicator that it's seeping in, like the seed has been planted, right?
Nothing hurts like the truth, darn it.
Right, exactly. Because you were saying, like, when you point out that shadow portion of you and you're not ready to take a look at that, that's definitely going to be something that's going to trigger you into some sort of negative emotion. But, it's not going to just go away. It's going to be there because somebody just basically showed it to you. So right. That's the beginning stage of healing that part.
And, as we do our spiritual growth and our spiritual journey, we get lighter, we get more fun.
Yes.
People say to me all the time, you have such great energy. And I think, thank you. You should have seen me a lot of years ago, when I carried this huge weight of the world around on my shoulders and life was boring and I was always stressed. I had bleeding ulcers and all sorts of things. And now I lead a very free and happy flowing life. And people say, you have such a great life. You're so lucky. And I go, no luck involved. I created my life, consciously created, and decide how my life is going to go.
How do these personality types fit into your intuition? So how do those marry together? Because you're definitely a coach that sort of melds all of those different modalities. So how do those go together?
Well, when I know their personality type, I know all their patterns, right?
Right.
And then as I'm coaching them, I hear, it just comes to me what to say, what they need to hear. The messages just come, and I can take it deeper from a model of a personality type into a person. And this is just a tool. I do use all these other things that I've learned about energy and manifesting and letting go and law of attraction and abundance, all of those things. And man, I've been manifesting lots of really cool things.
Are you looking for a new book to read? Because I know I always am. Head to Storytime in Paris on Paris Underground Radio with your host, Jennifer Garrity, as she interviews fascinating authors that have a French connection. We will be right back with The Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio.
I wanted to ask you what somebody could expect from a session with you.
Yeah, I have a shift program. It's called Shift to Transform Your Life, Love, and Relationships. I think it's what it's called. And in that, I take you through a number of these steps. We do look at your childhood. We do look at your personality. We look at, what it is you want, your thinking process, how to let go of some of those stories that trap us in non-reality. How many times have you had, I had this experience recently with my son, and I got into this story and I was upset, and we met and we stood toe to toe, and it was like, no. And finally he just said to me, Mom, if you're hurt, why don't you just tell me that? And the whole story, when we got into it, even with intuition, was wrong. It was totally off base. And so, we lead our own journey, even though we're intuitives, but I use my intuition to look above overall, right?
Yeah. It's infinitely easier to do this work for other people than it is to do for yourself, because like you said, you're in that situation with your son, you're in that heightened state of wounding. It's really hard to access your intuition at that moment. And so, in order for me, I know personally, I really have to take the time. I have to take a time out and be like, okay, I need to go to my corner and I need to go meditate and actually get into the right space in order to at least come to a place where I'm reacting from my heart space as opposed to my ego and my brain.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And we must remember our ego has a vested interest in keeping us where we are. We need to understand that's a whole different mechanism there that we need to overcome. But, for me, I am so much more adventurous and I'm joyful, and it's about thriving in your life. And are you in the box? Are you willing to get out of the box? We form these patterns of everything in our life, how we eat, how we drive to the store, how we react to people. And that's what makes it the same boring. And I'm just putting out a newsletter actually where I tell people this one experience where I decided, I went to the grocery store and I thought, what would it be like if I started at the other end? Instead of at the produce, I'll start at the other end. And so I started there, but it ends up that instead of going down the aisles, I was coming up the aisles. It was so disorienting, and I was seeing things that I hadn't seen before in a different way. And it was almost stressful, but it was kind of cool in showing me that my mind's very fixed, right? We go in unconscious because we believe it saves us time and it's easier, but then it's boring. So I have an interesting thing. I asked my guides, because I go at life 99 miles an hour. And so I asked my guides that if there's something important that I need to take notice of, make my left ear ring. And so I can be going along and all of a sudden my ear will start to ring. And I've trained myself now often enough that I'll stop and I'll go, okay, what is it? What is it that I'm supposed to see, hear, do, whatever? And it pauses me. And we all can do that.
I've had that experience before, and I didn't, and it was actually earlier on my spiritual awakening. I don't get it so much anymore, but earlier what I would get is in my left ear, I would get a high pitched tone. And then in my right ear, I would get like a lower pitched tone. And it was very obvious. It was something like my guides were tapping me on the shoulder, trying to tell me something. At the time, I couldn't figure out what it is they were trying to tell me because I didn't have the right tools. I didn't know enough at the time to really investigate and to understand what it was that they were trying to tell me. But I think it was one of those situations where they were using every single means possible in order to get my attention. So yeah, I really love that. That's a good way to bring that back in and say, hey, if you want to give me a sign, that's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and if you're at the beginning of your spiritual growth, these are things you can do so that you start to train and form patterns of listening or stopping or becoming more aware or getting in touch with your guides and, the realms that are available to us. Only we don't know that and we need to ask.
Yeah. Now, I know that this work that you do, it is cumulative. So I know that you can't just necessarily expect to have one session and have all of your shadow work done and that sort of thing. What is that sort of sweet spot? What do you find with your clients? Like, how many sessions do you usually recommend?
I ask them for a commitment of 6 sessions to begin with. And in those 6 sessions, I'm going to start laying a foundation, bring them to awareness of themselves. We're going to start looking at some of the things that are, the wounds or the things that's happening in life, and then give them a perspective of why they're happening, maybe how they can shift things and the energy. And a lot of people aren't aware of energy, right? Their own energy of, are they putting out negative energy or positive energy and all those sorts of things, and helping them to get to a higher vibration. And so at least 6 sessions is what I ask for. And, I just intuitively, I don't generally set them up. We're going to start with this and we'll see where we go. And intuition takes over and away we go. And we work on whatever comes up.
Oh, that sounds great. Okay. So if somebody wants to book a set of 6 sessions with you because they are at this moment saying yes, yes, yes to all of this, how do they get a hold of you?
On my website, eileenhead.com, there is a free call. And I ask you to hop on that call and we'll chat about where you're at and what you're looking for. And then I'll tell you how the coaching package works and we will move forward. I do a couple readings of personalities and I also do individual readings. And, I wanted to add that this is for single people. This is so important for singles who are out there in that realm, because dating online, and especially as we mature, gets to be more difficult because some of us are set in our ways. And this is a wonderful tool to know what you're bringing to relationships, what your worth is, because your worth can really take a hit. Yes, no, I don't like you. Okay, now I'm moving on. It's like,
right.
Whoa.
Well, and also not only that, but it's something that is difficult from the standpoint of if you are on your spiritual journey, when you are in that process of clearing and raising your vibration and doing all of that, it becomes difficult to energetically match with somebody to begin with, and then add all of the other, wounding or all the other patterns and the things that you might be stuck in. It makes it that much more difficult, right?
Yes, it can. But, I'm always working on changing my perspective. And so, I would take difficult and I would say more interesting. And, isn't that interesting? Because I'm not personalizing as much stuff now. I understand that person got scared or they got triggered or they didn't want to change their ways or they didn't feel they could fit in with me more often is the case. Because I've done a lot of this work. It's like, I'm not going to be with someone who, if you're open to growing, that's a possibility for me. But if you're really set and saying, nope, take me as I am, and we're not an energetic match, then I'm happy to continue single until I find that person that's an energetic match.
100%. And I've said this to a lot of my clients as well, where, they're curious as to why maybe they've been single for a few years and they're on the spiritual journey. And a lot of times what happens is the universe is like, well, you're rapidly growing so much and your energy is changing so much. If you start dating somebody now, they may be an energetic match now, but then in 6 months, if they're not growing at the same pace that you are or relatively the same pace, you're going to sort of outgrow them energetically and it's going to be done. But it depends on if that person was necessary for your experience or for your learning and figuring out your triggers and things like that. So it's all a really beautiful dance that happens on whether or not you need somebody to come into your experience to help you move forward or not.
And every person is meant to, or it would not be happening. So, the guy who says, no, you're not for me, I'm moving on. It's like, okay, thank you. I learned though. I'll take the knife out of my heart and I'll do a little bit of healing, but I did learn a lot. So thank you for that.
Well, it helps to depersonalize it a lot as well, because I mean, I'm on the apps and stuff. And so I had been talking to this guy and literally we had only exchanged maybe 3 or 4 text messages. And he basically was like, "Oh, I hope you can deal with the fact that I'm a sex addict." And I'm like, "Thanks for being honest. This is really great." I said, "Well, energetically, I'm not cool with my partner actually having sex with other people. So yeah, good luck." So I didn't take it personally in any way. I wasn't like, "Oh my God, what a horrible person." No judgment. I was like, "Good luck. And I hope you find that perfect woman that is exactly in the same place that you are." So to be able to have that energy to move forward, it helps to not be wounded by literally every last little thing that happens when you are out there dating.
Yeah. And for me, everything's an adventure. Like, oh, I learned that. Oh, I learned that. I just love learning now. And so, yeah, instead of personalizing it, it's, more often than not, it's me saying, sorry, I don't feel we're a match. And, but as you told me in my session, and I've learned before as well, each of us are meant to be, even if it's for an hour, we are meant to have that exchange. Season or reason or lifetime, right?
Yeah, 100%. That is really beautiful. That's a good place to close this episode, I think. So I want to thank you again for joining me today. I want to tell everyone again, you can reach Eileen at eileenhead.com. So EILEENHEAD.com. It's been lovely speaking to you.
It's been so much fun, and I'd love to come on again with some other things. So I will look forward to hearing from anyone who's interested in learning more.
Absolutely.
And, what I would say to all of you is find a way to thrive, because that's the way life's meant to be.
Beautiful. Okay, if you would like to get in touch with me, you can reach me at infinitesoullove.com. You can also reach me on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, as well as Facebook at Infinite Soul Love 1111.
This episode of The Heart of You was produced by Jennifer Garrity for Paris Underground Radio. For more great content, please join us on Patreon.